What's going on, everybody? It's Barmine from Barmine Tech, and today we're going to talk about a big addition to my home lab. So it's been a project that I've been talking about for a long time, and if you've been watching the channel for a little bit, you might remember how I've mentioned I have these Mac Minis for about a year or so now. I did a video about last November, I think it was, how to make a budget HA setup or high availability, and I use these Mac Minis to do so. I never used them again. I tried using them for a school project last year. That didn't work out as well. And I've just been pushing it off on the back burner for forever about making these Mac Minis into a cluster to control my LXC containers and run them so I could have some more resources freed up on my main mini lab server. I finally got around to doing it, and today we're going to talk about that and see if it is actually worth it. So let's get right into it. Just a disclaimer, today's not going to be like a full-blown tutorial. I've already covered how to set up HA, and I've talked about how to set up Proxmox and clusters in the past. So I'll put some links down to those videos if you're interested in setting it up. Today's going to be more talking about how my setup is going to work, what it's going to do, and my thoughts on it. I'll go over some of the details of how I set certain things up, but I'm not going to show how to set up Proxmox in the cluster and HA from scratch. I just wanted to put that out there just so nobody's misled. But now let's get into what I did. So you can see I'm over here in my data center, and this is for my Barmine Tech cluster, and now I feel like a big shot because I have 5 nodes in my cluster like all the other big YouTubers. Unfortunately, these are not the best PCs over here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the video, but you can see over here I have the Barmine Tech server, I have the 3 Mac Minis, and then I have my mini lab. So the idea of this is that I have all of these LXC containers on my mini lab that are using up resources that I could actually be running off of my mini lab. So I do have some pretty beefy hardware in here. I have 12 cores of CPU and 32 gigs of RAM, so it does do everything I need to do, but I thought about it'd be nicer to free up some more space if I was able to move the majority, if not all, these LXC containers to the Mac Mini cluster. And then the idea from there is that I'll put them into like a budget HA, as I like to call it, and if anything happens, it'll continuously migrate them and make sure they stay online. So how I did this was I leveraged Proxmox backup server. So I have all my containers and VMs being backed up every day. So all these containers are backed up. So if I do need to migrate them, I can, which is going to be very useful for this process. I then set up the 3 Mac Minis to have Proxmox on them. Now, for whatever reason, they don't take Proxmox 8. It has to do something with the hardware in the Mac Minis and how Proxmox is designed. So I had to go to Proxmox 7, upgrade Proxmox 7, do an in-place upgrade to 8, and then upgrade Proxmox 8. This isn't a fun process. I did this probably about 9 to 12 times because I made mistakes and I had to redo it. So I already wasn't off to a very good start for this project. Another mistake that I made was when I was making the storage on the Proxmox, I made it as LVMs. So it had the local and the local LVM. I need ZFS to do replication, and this was something that I completely forgot from the last time I made it. So by the way that I'm going to be making the HA possible is that I'm going to use replication jobs. So all that's going to do is it's going to replicate the volumes that the containers use across to the other machines, so all 3 machines will have the volumes needed to run the LXC containers. Typically you would use some sort of network-based storage. I don't have enough network-based storage or something that's going to be fast enough across my network to do this, so that's why I'm using replication, and that's kind of why I call it a budget HA. It works, but it's really not the best option. So I had to conquer that task of actually setting up ZFS the right way. Then finally, I kept running into the issue where I would make the 3 nodes. So you can see I do have 1, 2, and 3. And if I expand all of them, I finally had them set up with ZFS. So you can see it had local ZFS. And then I would join them to the cluster and the ZFS would go away and we had local LVM. The local LVM was showing that it's not available, and I was really confused why. So I figured there was something wrong with how I did my install. Every time I'd look into it, it would say go to data center, storage, and then in here you could just add ZFS, which I did, and you can come over here and it would say no pools found. I kept thinking I just had to restrict it on the nodes over here. However, that wasn't the case. You just need to tell it which host to scan. Once you do that, there's my R pool, and now I can make my local ZFS. I didn't realize this 2 to 3 times, and I had to reinstall Proxmox, I think twice, because I didn't realize that's how that worked. And I felt like a real idiot afterwards, but it's alright because now I figured it out. I then was able to name this local ZFS, and I was able to specify it over the 3 Mac Minis. So now you can see they all have matching storage, which already was on the Mac Minis. If I come over to the shell and I do ZFS list, you can see here's the R pool. But you can see if I do ZFS list, it shows the R pool right there. And there's another command, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But that shows that it has the pool. Now, all three of them are the same. I set them all up the same way. I gave the ZFS pool about 375 gigs because I figured that'd be more than enough data for the containers to run off of. So after I got the storage sorted out and everything worked, I was able to actually start testing with stuff. Now, this is where the next set of issues arose, because for whatever reason, when I would try to download a test container, it was giving me really old versions of Ubuntu and other containers. So like if I came over here and I searched Ubuntu, now I have 24, but last night like I had 16, 18, 20, and those don't work because it doesn't work really well on the hypervisor anymore. It probably just needed some time to like update and go through, but it wasn't working. So I had these two test containers that I made, and I wasn't able to do anything with them because Proxmox gave me too old of a version of Ubuntu to work with. So it actually would keep giving me warnings about the container. There was a log, and I ended up having to look up the log message because it kept giving me a warning, and it pretty much just kept saying, hey, this version of the OS you're trying to run is too old, and this is why you're having these issues. So, of course, that was another issue that I had. Even though I assigned it to the proper disk, we started having issues where like they would say the subvolume doesn't exist and this and that. And if I come over here, I can't remove these, unfortunately, because it gives me an error that it doesn't exist, but it does. So I'm going to have to sit and spend some time and probably mess with like the CLI to get this to work properly, but that's whatever. So finally, I decided just to make my life easier and pull a container for my actual main server to see if everything worked the way I thought it would. So I didn't want things to overlap. So what I did was I took this Omada container that I had running on my mini lab, and I turned it off there, and I restored it from a backup because I can't migrate across from my mini lab to the Mac Minis because the storage mappings don't line up. So if we look, everything over here uses LVM main, and I don't have LVM main on the Mac Minis. So this was the issue why I can't just easily migrate everything, which isn't the biggest deal because I have Proxmox backup server. So to get around this one, I just came over to my backups. I took a quick backup of Omada, and I was able to restore to it and give it a new container ID. After I got Omada on one of the nodes, it smooth sailing from there, and I was able to test to make sure the migration worked. So you can see if I just right click and I click to migrate, I can send it across to another node. And here you go, it's requesting HA migration. Now, this really isn't HA migration because I'm telling it to migrate. It is in a sense, but this is just me manually migrating it. And it's going to shut down the container over here, and then it'll pop up saying that it's starting the migrate process. So you can see over here, it started the task by the HA resource. That was us migrating it. And once this container shuts down, it will start to move it. So we'll wait for that really quick. And you can see over here now, it shut down. It had the paper airplane and it was moving it. I know it was quick. If you didn't catch it, I almost missed it myself, but it migrated it over. And now if we look down here in the logs, it's trying to start it up. So in a second, Omada will come up, and that's how easy it is to migrate it. So after I made sure that that worked, you can see now it came up. Now I could start doing the other processes that were needed to kind of make my HA work. So at this point, just to recap, I made 3 Mac Minis with Proxmox 7. I then upgraded it to Proxmox 8, ensured everything worked, joined them to my main cluster with my other Proxmox nodes, and now I'm able to actually start moving over some of my containers from my main server over to these new Mac Minis, which are going to host my LXC containers. So now we actually get to start the process of how I actually set up HA through these replication jobs. So the way that this works is that if you come over to the container, and you've probably noticed this, it's on VMs as well, that there's a tab for replication. Now you can see over here, I have 2 replication jobs that replicate the storage over to the other 2 nodes. So I don't know which node I originally started this machine on, but you can see over here, it's going to target node 2 and node 3. Or Mac Mini 2 and Mac Mini 3 to replicate the storage volumes over. So that's done really easily by just clicking add on the container, and then you just specify which node you want to replicate the subvolumes over to. It's probably best if you just leave this on the default option for every 15 minutes to ensure that you'll have the most up-to-date volumes in case something does happen, it does need to fail over. You can specify other times if you want, so if you don't want it to replicate as often, you could do every 30 minutes, 2 hours, or just once a day. However, in the chance that something does happen, I'd prefer to have more up-to-date subvolumes available. You can rate limit if you need it. I don't need to, and then you can of course make sure it's enabled by default. You would just click OK, and then the job will actually try to sync up. So like you would see right here, it's pending, and now it's going to try to sync this data over to the Barmine tech server. So I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to disable this really quick, and now I'm just going to remove it. Now, if you do have an error like this, you can click on the logs and it'll kind of give you an idea what's going on. And then when you do first set up a job as well, you can run schedule now and it'll run it immediately. So you have that first replication already done. So now that's the first step. So now let's actually do that with another container. So if I come over to my mini lab, we can move over something else. So like I'll move over this reactive resume container. Okay, so now my backup is done. And of course, if you already have backups done, you don't need to do that. So I'll just ensure that I do. So if I come over to mini backup, my backups, here's my reactive resume. And it is one that I already back up every day. So I didn't have to do this again. But if I come over here, and I'm going to remove this. I'm not going to purge it because I don't want to mess anything up, but now that's gone. So now if I come over to Mac Mini 3 and I click on Mini Backup, I'm going to restore it. And this is just the process that I was following, and I need to make sure I select the right volume. So I'm now going to put it on the local ZFS because that is the storage that's not shared, but it's mapped across all 3 nodes, so they all have access to it. Or click restore. Now it's going to restore this. Now when I say that all 3 have access to it, it's not that they're all sharing the same storage, it's that they all have their own storage called local CFS. So in a sense, we're kind of tricking Proxmox because it thinks that it's the same, but it's not. It's just that all 3 nodes have the storage named the same way. So they're able to kind of, in a sense, share it, but they're not really sharing it. It just makes it that we can easily transfer data across it because they're all using the same storage IDs. I'm going to give this a little bit of time. It just needs to restore. It should be back in a minute or so. So when that's all done, we'll be right back again. So now my container is back on, and you can see over here, it's on Mac Mini 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the container. I'm going to click on replication, add, and now I'm going to set the 2 target nodes that I want it to go to. So being that it's on 3 already, I want to send it to 1, and I want to send it to 2. It's already on 3, so I don't need to send it to 3. And if I try, it won't even give me an option, right? Because it's already there. So now you can see over here, the next sync is pending, and it should sync up in a minute or so, and then we'll be able to actually have the data across all 3 nodes like I was saying. Now there is another way to do this, so you can come up to data center, and in data center you can come to replication, and you could add it in here. You would just need to type in the container ID you want to use and the targets, and it works the same way. However, it is just a little bit easier if you just kind of do it this way, because then you'll need to type the container IDs and possibly mess something up. So while this syncs up, what we're going to do is set up the final options for HA. So you do need to come back up to the data center, and you need to come to options. Now over here is HA settings, and this is really important because if we don't set this, it's not actually going to attempt to migrate the containers or your VMs if that's what you're doing. It's just going to put them in a freeze state. So if we open this up, we can see on the dock, freeze state just ensures that everything gets frozen. It'll be able to be recovered. There are other options, so if I do drop this down, like default is conditional, so it would just, I guess, depend on what happens, but you have other ones. So there's freeze, failover, migrate, and conditional, like I was saying. So you could read through the doc if you want. I was working with migrate because that's going to be the best option. It's going to move it over to another node, or there's failover, which will do it similarly. I was trying both of them. I always used migrate in the past, so I'm just going to stick with migrate. So after that's set, it will actually work to move over nodes, and if anything breaks, it will just, move it over. Just checking in on this because I'm going to turn this on so we can kind of simulate a HA failover. You can see that the first one synced up, and here's the second one, and it's all good. Now my container's on. We do have one more thing I want to show how to set up, And that's if we come over to HA, you can see there's two options. There's fencing and groups. We're not going to worry about fencing because I think the default options are pretty good. All this is going to do is it's going to go through quorum with the cluster, and if it's going to go through and if it detects that one of the nodes isn't alive or it's not responding, it knows to not send either the containers or the virtual machines or whatever you're working with over to that node. It knows to remove it from the group temporarily until it comes back online and says, hey, I'm here. What you might want to do, make it a little bit easier, is you can make an HA group and you can click create and you can select whatever nodes you want and you can specify them for HA. So like you see over here, I have my HA group. We're going to use this in a second. Now both of these are ready. If I come up to more and manage HA, now I could specify to make this highly available. So I can select my HA group. I want it to be started in the request state, so it actually will move it and start it back up. And other than this, we're all good. So if I click add, this is all working now. So ideally, if Mac Mini 3 goes offline, it'll move it to either 2 or 1. So what we'll do is open up a shell. I'm going to come over to Mac Mini 3. And if I do HA tech manager status, you can see that all the services are running. So on 1, 2, and 3, it's working. Minilab and Barmine tech are relevant, so don't have to worry about that. And then you can see we have the containers. So these are some of the ones that failed, but right now we're going to be working with 118, so you can see it started. So I'm going to simulate a loss of a node by disconnecting the network. So I just disconnected the network from Mac Mini 3. So in a second, we should see this go red. And you can see over here, it's not responding to the cluster. So it's saying that it went offline in my data center view. If I come over here and I run this command again, you can see that Mac Mini 3 is showing that it's possibly dead because it's not responding. It's going to give it a certain amount of time, and then it's going to acknowledge that it's not responding to the quorum anymore or the cluster, and it's going to work to move those containers off of it. Now it does take a second. It's not like an instant thing, but within a minute or two, it should work to start moving over. So like I could keep checking HA manager status, and we can see, okay, it has an old timestamp. It's going to work to start moving that stuff over. So over here, we can see now we're getting a connection issue because there's no connection to the host, and I'm in the shell on another host. So that's why this works. So it's not showing it's online, so that's fine. So I'm just going to acknowledge that, and I'm going to move over to Mac Mini 2. Now, like I said, the process isn't instant, but it does work pretty well. It just takes a little bit of time to get it migrated over. And we can keep checking it over in here, so you can still see it's still timing out, so it will move over in a minute. And when it starts the move over process, we'll be right back. Okay, and I just got the Discord notification that it's actually trying to move the node. So now we can see over here, 118 is being fenced. So like I said, that means it's trying to move it over to another node that's available. And you can see actually it just did it. So reactive resume moved from Mac Mini 3 to Mac Mini 2. So the process does take a few minutes, but it does automatically get it back online once it detects that a node goes off. So if I come over to reactive resume, I can come over to the console and we can see that we're working and it's online, it's working. Now, if node 3 does come back online, it's not going to just automatically move it back, but we can if we do want to later on. The idea is just to get it back on and working for the time being. You can see like the uptime went down to 40 seconds because it just moved it over, but everything is working properly. The idea is I'm going to move over the majority, if not all of my LXC containers to this cluster and try to keep them so they're kind of highly available and distributed across more nodes versus just using my mini lab for everything and using up a lot of the resources over there. But this is how I kind of set up like a budget HA on my cluster. I know I said I wasn't going to like go too crazy into explain everything, but I felt like I needed to really explain how the HA and the replication, all that worked. So that's how that all works. Now, in the beginning, I mentioned, is it worth it? Or what do I think about this? So this is really mixed, right? So I've had these computers that I got about a year ago. I thought they were perfect for this, and they kind of are, but they kind of aren't. So if you're not familiar, ZFS is a protocol for storage that uses a lot of memory. These Mac Minis only have 8 gigabytes. If we come over to node 3, right now it's dropped down because there's nothing running on it, but when the other container was running on it, it had a significant amount of memory being used. Like I said, there's only 8 gigs available. The majority of my containers aren't going to use a ton of memory, but it could cause it to crash if I end up using more than available. So that's one of the downfalls. Secondly, these Mac Minis only have one disk. They don't really have an option for expansion, unfortunately. And I don't think I really want to expand them just because they're going to kind of be a pain to do so. So that's kind of another limiting factor. So yes, I do think this is a cool project for now. However, going forward, I might look to migrate it to something else, whether it's some other mini PCs that I'm able to find cheap on eBay that have better hardware and better capabilities, such as multiple disk options. So I could use something like Ceph or anything else. I need to scroll eBay and kind of see what I want to do. Or if somebody wants to sponsor a video and send me over some cool servers, that'd be pretty cool too. But that's another conversation. But my thoughts on this fully, I think for now this will be something that's going to work pretty well for me, but going forward in the future, I'm not too sure about how long it's going to work out smoothly. I might run into hardware limitations, and we'll see when that happens. But this is how I set up budget HA for my LXC containers in my home lab. As always, I want to thank you all for watching. I have links to all the gear in my home lab down below, the Discord server if you want to join up and chat in there. And like I said, I'll try to remember to link the videos to set up Proxmox, set up Cluster, and originally how I set up the budget HA last year. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and as my buddy Don would say, hack till it hurts.